I did that.
Good evening and welcome to the Bethel Local Schools Board of Education special meeting in regards to our facilities committee. The date is Monday, September 13th, 2021. Call to order at 6:07 p.m. Ms. Reese, can you please call the roll?
Yes, Rick Gilbert.
Here.
Justin Firks,
Present.
Tina Hagman,
Present.
Caleb Rumpel.
Here.
I heard you say it, I didn't recognize your name. Danny Eagle.
Here.
Lori Sebastian, absent. Julie Reese, present.
Item number 3, additions to the agenda if needed. Do we have any additional items? Item 4, communications, meetings, and announcements. Anything additionally? All right, number 5, items for discussion, subcommittee reports. Underneath letter A, we have a report and status update for not only our K-5 project, but also athletic stadium project as well. I'd like to welcome Mrs. Laura Little from Garmin Miller, who is here with us this evening in attendance to give us an update on the project and the most recent developments.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. My apologies. Are we all good?
You don't want to be.
Where we go? All right.
Page 2, please.
Yeah, so so project update, schematic design that your board approved the schematic design submission last month. So that is now closed. We're gathering all the rest of the documents for the design development phase submission. So that'll be the next thing that you'll probably see next month to your board to close out that design development submission. Peterson Construction did receive bids for the early site package. We are looking at ways to reduce the rock excavation that came in a little bit higher than what we were hoping it might be. So we're trying to find some other ways to cut down on those site costs. So that way we don't have to spend so much on the site. So that way you can put that better into the building. We did have a meeting last month to discuss the door hardware. Also had a meeting to discuss the field house building and the materials for that. Our team is going through and revising the floor plan, exterior elevations, the building section, so you can go back and try to get those materials procured. Ofcc, we also sent through 2 variances to Ofcc and they denied both of the variances that we had submitted. I have another slide to explain that further. So on the costs, and what we're trying to, and the next slide, yeah.
Okay.
On the costs and what we're trying to reduce some of that rock excavation, we had the discus and the shot put more on the southwestern side of the football stadium outside the fence. But that's also where you have a natural swale coming through from the existing farm field. So we're looking at if we can move that further toward the north, still on the west side of the stadium, but we move that further towards the north, could that potentially reduce some rock excavation? So we're trying to look at that. Next slide. Another way we're trying to reduce, look at how to reduce some costs. So with the grass stadium turf, if that were to switch to artificial turf, there's a lot more water that runs off of that area. And so the highlighted portion of the storm line went from a 36-inch pipe to a 48-inch pipe, planning that you would get potentially artificial turf planning for that. So if we were to eliminate that pipe altogether, basically take all of the inlet pipes that are coming into that detention basin and just drain them straight into the detention rather than taking them all the way to the far east end and then taking them in into that lowest portion, that could also reduce some costs. That's not necessarily for rock excavation, that's just going to help offset some of the excavation costs that we are seeing. So Peterson is putting together some costs on that.
The previous slide, the disc and shot put area
Yes.
is where it's planned now, present.
No, that is us moving
That
that
is, oh,
to
that's
moving that
what we want it to
north.
be.
That's, well, that was what we were proposing to you guys, potentially taking it up north. We just discussed this an hour ago. So our team was, I just got this to Tina really late because our team was working on this in the last hour after our previous discussion.
So Danny, just so you know, the other possibility that they discussed was on the north side of the stadium.
If you want
But some things came up, I mean, one is that that's potential area to build in the future. And Laura pointed out the discus area could be moved in the future, but if we don't have to do that, why do it? And then a couple things that Damon brought up were if it's just west of the stadium, the fans could sit in the bleachers and at the top, if they're standing at the top, they would be overlooking that area and could watch their kids from the bleachers. So that was kind of the point. He said they did that another school, which I can't remember what school.
Fort Lawn.
Gave a different example. I remember that one. But yeah, so that was one of the things that he pointed out was that you could overlook it if that's a place for it. Is this the right one you want?
Okay, so the previous one had it up there farther to the west.
Correct.
That's where it is now.
No,
No,
it was on the south
It was over
west
here.
portion. Yeah.
these are two proposals.
Well, this is what we were looking at, but then after today's discussion, it was suggested that we put it still on the west side of the stadium,
Okay.
just move it further north. That was the previous slide, so that way your fans could still see it from the bleachers.
All right, thank you.
I think we might be on slide 5 now, maybe. Yes,
Yep, right there.
okay. So this is one of the variances that we sent to OFCC. This is their official decision. This one is on the fire alarm wiring. So we sent in a variance request asking that the fire alarm wiring not be installed in conduit, which is so basically we sent in a variance request because we're trying to vary from the design manual. So the design manual requires that all fire alarm wiring be installed in conduit above ceilings. So, but to look at ways to reduce costs on the project, asking if we could instead install it in a J-hook up above the ceiling. We are not going to see it anyways. They denied this request. So back to our previous conversations that OFCC has had with Bethel. Just because OFCC denies it does not mean that you have to follow that. You just don't potentially get funding for OFC's portion of that 32,000 later when you actually receive the funding from this project. We are still looking at ways to reduce costs. We do feel like this would be a good one to still take and not do the fire alarm in conduit. OFCC's stance on this is they want higher protection for that fire alarm if anybody gets up above the ceiling. That's why they require it to be in conduit. But it is not a code requirement. This goes above and beyond what Ohio's code requires. So if we don't take this one, we still have $200,000 that we're looking at somehow saving money. We have to find some option how to save $200,000 between plumbing, mechanical, and electrical. This would help us on our way.
Laura, when would you anticipate Peterson having an idea on potential cost savings with the storm sewer pipe?
They'll have that in the next week or so.
So one other thing, correct me if I'm wrong, but at the last meeting, I think one thing that was pointed out was it's the OFCC requirement for conduit. It is not a fire code requirement.
Correct.
So if we choose to not do the conduit and save the 32,000, so we wouldn't get the matching part from OFCC, but we would not be violating any regulation.
Correct.
Just curious, what kind of conduit is it? PVC or steel, galvanized? Does it matter? I was just curious.
Offhand, I don't know. I'd have to look that up. I would assume galvanized.
On the site package, are we going to be using all of the overburden within the site?
So all of the owner's contingency? Is that what you mean?
As part of the excavation, we'll be digging up clay, topsoil, all of that. Are we going to reuse all of that on the site?
We're actually slightly short. Because of so much of the area that we're having to build up, we are slightly short. So they are going to use the area just north of the stadium and kind of take from there, not really create a pit. We don't want to create a pond or anything, but just kind of take off from that area. It is kind of high over there. We have a lot of depth before we get to the rock. So that would be a good area to take that from. But yeah, we don't want to have to bring any fill into the site.
Or potentially in front of the elementary, the new K-5 building. Okay. Well, he said that would be maybe possible.
We would prefer that be taken more from the back area rather than the front.
If we take it from the back, we could lose the farm. Could lose the possibility of running the ground. Because you're taking the topsoil.
But we're not taking from any of the area, I think, that you're farming out this year. There is that line that goes straight across the whole site. We're just taking from that north side.
Okay. Well, so
I
just
think
saying,
it's- I
it
think
could not
it's
be farmed in the
outside.
future then, probably.
I think it's outside of the line where you were already farming today.
I was hoping we might have had a little extra that we could sell, so that was the reason for that. Sorry for the.
Nice
rabbit.
try.
Doesn't hurt to ask.
The next one is okay.
That's fine. If we could get approval from the board tonight on these two items, that would be fantastic. The next item then that we submitted is the classroom sinks. So another cost savings items we were discussing was removing the sinks that are in each one of the classrooms in kindergarten, 1st through 5th. This would not affect any of the art rooms or science rooms. Those still, we're still keeping classrooms in there, or the sinks in there. But really, it was discussed that you don't have them today in the classrooms. In your kindergarten classrooms, you will still have sinks in the restroom that's adjacent to the kindergarten classroom. But many times what those sinks were used for that, so that students could come and get a drink without having to leave and go out into the hallway. But there's with COVID, nobody's even allowing anybody to drink off the bubblers anyways, and you have the bottled water fillers on all of the coolers that are out in the hallway. So we submitted that to OFCC, and they also declined this one. Denied this one. So we are saying that there's an estimated cost impact of that $100,000. That would go towards the $100,000 that we're trying to make up on the plumbing side for cost reductions. Discussion on those two items. Do you want me just to complete?
You can finish and then we can talk about it.
That's fine. So next steps, we are working towards finalizing the documents. We are getting really close. We are trying to finalize documents for early November. So in the next month, we will have a design meeting to go over the revised flooring selections. That was also another area where we were trying to reduce some costs. So we will be looking at that. Also going to have a meeting to review the keying of doors. And then we, again, like I said before, reconcile the design development submission, get that, the board to approve that. And then the finalize the specifications, our lead design documentation, and finalize the documents. And that was just the extra page.
The second variance request, it mentions 2 communal science classrooms. Is that separate from the science classrooms that you mentioned you would still have them, or?
They're called a related classroom, but they're science classrooms.
So they,
So you essentially have 3, so one in the K12 pod is I think it's called related arts, but it could be science art, that keeps it. And then there's 2 science classrooms in the 4-5 pod that would keep things.
It's the $132,000, correct,
Yes.
savings? What will it eventually cost in the project? It would cost us 20% of that overall, since they would be paying 80. Is that correct?
Correct. It would,
26,
yeah, I see what you're saying.
$26,500 is what.
Right, their portion of that you would not receive funding on. Correct. When you receive your funding.
Seems like a small number, you know.
Well, considering
what we've been talking about.
considering the cuts the district's already made to the building project, it's challenging to continue to take away from the building when it's already a pretty basic building as it is. The sewage storm sewer pipe could be obviously an issue with some water in the retention basin. It's been talked about to put some no-mow grass in, which would be a once a year, you'd have to mow it type surface. And then the classroom sinks, you know, that'd be challenging as well. The good thing is the students still have access to their classroom sinks that are within approximate location of their classroom building. There will be several classrooms, art and science, that will still have classroom sinks. Is it practical? Is it perfect? No. But I would also probably say on the flip side that our current students don't have sinks in their classrooms now. So it's not any different than what they're currently used to. So that's one way of looking at it.
Does anybody know why OFCC recommends having sinks in the rooms? I mean, there must be some advantage.
It was on the slide at the
Yeah,
bottom,
so
their recommendation was on there.
IT, COVID, so on and so forth. It's on the bottom.
Yeah, we talked
Bottom
about
of
the
that slide.
COVID aspect today. It'd be nice for that. I mean, the only other thing to consider on both of these that we talked to is that if we eliminate them now, they're gone forever. It's a redesign to put them back. So not a huge deal, but
Right.
I just idea about that.
And although $30,000 seems like quite a bit of money, it is relatively small number in the grand scheme of the budget.
Right. Same.
And I don't know where we would find additional money to cut within the building project.
The only other place I can think of that a sink would be handy in a music room. But other than that, I don't know about anywhere else, but certainly to be around it.
I thought we left a couple of bigger ticket items in the last meeting. I mean, I'm sure there's more cuts coming though, so.
The only big ticket item I can think off the top of my head, and I would not recommend doing it because you're gonna need it for lead points, would be your pond system. And I wouldn't recommend doing that. I don't know how you're gonna get your lead points if you take that out. And we probably still gotta find a couple of points somewhere.
Well, these sound like very sensible suggestions to me.
So does it matter that they don't add up to 200,000? I just realized that we said 200,000 and it's 132.
Right, we still need to get to 200,000, so our team is still looking at the other options. We will still need to, still get to that 200,000. We plan to discuss that at the next facilities meeting.
I didn't bring a list with me, so I don't know. I thought there was a couple items that I don't know that will probably go eventually anyhow. And something with the cubbies
The
or
windows,
doors
the
or.
blinds and such.
No, I thought there
That
was
was
like
already
cubbies
done.
or doors or some, some stuff that we put in.
Laura, do you happen to know, on average, how far is the average classroom no further than this far from a restroom? Do you have like an idea, basically? Because that's nice to be able to tell staff, right? Like, we may take this away, but your classroom is never any further than this far from a restroom.
Gotta be closer where you're going now.
Handy.
Well,
handy enough
You're
car.
gonna have a restroom on the main floor and now.
Agreed. Agreed.
I was
It's still
gonna
nice
say
to-
that, but I didn't
you know,
want to interrupt
They've
you.
seen these.
You gotta haul
plans.
upstairs or down.
might say 5 or 6 classrooms before you get to one, because like the 4-5 pod, the restrooms are on the west side, so the ones that would be the furthest away would be the ones on the far east side of that corridor, or that pod.
Yeah.
Um,
And there's no cut. Right?
it's
Because
like
we're
a
not using
circular
that.
loop. But then you just go down the main corridor to get, past the third grade classrooms, and there's another set of, your main restrooms are right there, so
So worst case scenario, you're about,
maybe 5 or 6,
unless if you're the furthest away.
I think so.
That's not bad. Right, I mean, that's just what I want to make a point of, because, you've seen these plans, you're thinking you're gonna have a sink in your room. Our teachers have seen that and they've thought about that, and that's what they're looking forward to, and, I just like to be able to say, here's what reality might be.
Well, then we also have teacher workrooms too. So if you're trying to send a student down to the restroom, you're right. But if
Yeah.
a teacher just needs to get something,
Right,
then we also have teacher workrooms that are closer too.
good point, that's a good point. You just need to, if you get wired with something. Do a quick experiment for the class, or demonstrate something that maybe not.
And the fifth graders are the ones that would have to go the furthest.
I think so.
So hopefully they can, if they have their hands dirty, they can keep from touching their clothes.
Spoke
You know,
like down that road before.
Your experience in installing sinks in other locations, how often do they get used?
It depends on the teacher.
I'm just thinking practically, I mean, if you're talking 20 seconds to wash your hands for every student that goes in there, that would take a little chunk of time.
You said restrooms are adjacent to kindergarten, they won't be in kindergarten either. is that correct?
They are in the kindergarten.
They're still remaining in
Yes.
kindergarten rooms, okay, good.
Yep.
So I didn't understand this either. The kindergarten rooms have a restroom and then an extra sink.
Okay,
So it would be removing that sink, but the restroom with the sink stays.
okay, good.
If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
I
have-
thought that's what I
they
said,
have-
that,
they have
that's
plus one
a
and sink.
rule, right? Like
Every
it has to-
kindergarten room is required to have a restroom with a sink, and then we added an additional classroom sink as
Okay,
well.
so we're ditching the extra and keeping the.
They'll still have a
required one.
restroom, toilet, and sink as well.
Okay. Cool.
Not perfect, but I think it gives you some options.
Right.
Without having to cut significantly from the community.
Then we need some money later.
Okay.
It costs us 120.
20% of the.
106, 240.
Cost us $106,000.
20% of the 132,000. I know 80% is what OCC would give us.
That's one of
So we use the 80%
later,
later, right? Because they wouldn't fund that.
but if we don't have it
Roughly,
now,
I mean,
it doesn't matter.
right, if we can't build it.
If we don't have it now, we don't have it now.
Right.
Doesn't matter what we might get back later.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, it's nice to think about, but you can only spend what you have.
So Laura, what you need to know is if we want to move forward with those two variances, correct?
Correct.
Or at least make a recommendation to the board to vote on.
Right.
Facilities committee typically makes recommendations.
Right.
I need to make a motion.
I don't think we have to make a motion. We don't have any voting authority.
I would recommend that we accept the suggestions of Garmin this time for the elementary building in connection with the two variances from OFCC.
Okay. I'm okay with it. I am getting a little concerned. I mean, this is just early. I don't know what's gonna happen. It's probably gonna happen anyhow, but I mean, is this what we're in for is, you know, small amounts chopping here and there? Or do we, or is there something bigger we can look at? I'm also concerned about the removing pipe, drainage pipe, because we have so many water issues now. I'm concerned about that, but we don't know if that's gonna happen or not. It's probably coming as well. But I'm okay with not doing these, even though they denied the variance.
This is kind of standard practice, correct? Once again, that you have the plans, then you start cutting for most projects.
This does happen. This is not unusual. That, you know, we have to work to get it within budget.
It seems like as we do this though, that and maybe I should have done this, I didn't bring you a list, but maybe we need a list of the things that are still in that we've considered before and kind of prioritize those. I think we had talked about doing that actually, so that the next cut that's needed, we can say, okay, here's the one that's at the top, gone. You know, something along those lines.
We've been given lists of alternates, correct?
Yes,
Already.
yes, that's what you guys were gonna
talking
go
about.
through is the alternate list. and
Well, not just the
prioritize-
alternates, but we
prioritize
kept
that.
some things in that maybe, you know, maybe as we look at priorities, one of those would be a higher thing to chop than one of these. I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying, it seems like in the future, we should have our priorities set so that when we do go over budget, which we will, that we know, we don't have to go through this, you know, talking about little items or you know, just go through the list and say, okay, that was next, or here's one that matches that amount, or, you know, whatever.
And you're right, we're down to little items.
Yeah.
Because we've cut the big items. But if we don't work to get the project back within budget, what's gonna give is you're not gonna have the funds to fill out that 4-5 pot. You know, we talked about building the shell, and you want the funds to build that out. So that's where we gotta make sure that we do cut and we do get the project with a budget so that you can fill out those classrooms, the interior.
Rick, did you have some comments? Since you're not.
These look pretty reasonable, and it's 65% of what we're looking for. So that looks like a really good start. You know, there's certain things we can't cut, but I guess the extra sinks, I could see that being expendable.
Okay, so you're in, Caleb? Caleb's shaking his head, so I think that's all we need to do. We're not,
Okay.
yeah, we don't get to vote or anything, so.
No,
Say
but-
we're gonna recommend to the board.
But
to
typically,
accept.
haven't we typically made a recommendation?
We make a recommendation, but we don't make a motion.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So everybody's kind of in agreement. We'll make them a recommendation to the board to accept Garvin Miller's proposal to
Okay.
not do these, even though the OFCC denied.
Are you gonna give them a rundown in the meeting of what we've talked about?
Yeah, I have to do my little summary. Unless you want to.
I'm good. You do much better than I do. I'll forget something. Man, a few words.
I did it that one time. It was kind of nice.
I was in a chipper mood that day.
Oh, okay. Okay, so, and that was all of your future steps, next steps. Is basically finalizing the documents. Okay, Mr. Brooks.
So we do have future next steps, correct, for the board meeting this evening? Anything else? What do we anticipate next facilities meeting looking like, Laura?
So the next one, we will, in that time, we'll have had a meeting regarding flooring, so we'll have an update on those flooring costs. Because also there, we were looking at removing $100,000, so we'll have an update on that. Also then, the update on the final costs and how to get that to that 200,000.
Secondly, do we have any hearing of the public? Any comments from folks that are participating or listening?
Yeah.
Done? Okay, our next meeting date and time, I do not have that in front of me. Can anybody help me out with that?
Well.
It's October 11th.
We need to have a special meeting before that.
Yes, I think that's for something else, so that. I think that'll be a board meeting, right, not a
Right.
facilities.
Not
meeting.
facilities, at a board meeting. To go over the GMP.
We don't have that date, it's special to do our GMP.
Okay, we can set that later, but our next facilities meeting,
Is October 11th.
October 11th. And do you anticipate that still being at 6 o'clock when we only need an hour? Okay.
Even with all the flooring and stuff that you want to. Out. No,
Okay, so our next meeting date and time will be October 11th, 2021 at 6 o'clock PM here in the high school media center. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Mr. Elam, can I get a second? Mr. Runkle, thank you. Ms. Reese, could you please call the roll?
Rick Gilbert,
Yes.
Justin First,
Yes.
Tim Hageman,
Yes.
Caleb Runkle,
Yes.
Amy Elam,
Yes.
Julie Reese, yes.
Okay, meeting is adjourned at 6:41 PM. We'll take a short break and look forward to you folks rejoining us at 7 o'clock for our regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting. Thank you.
And right. And stop the YouTube.
We're gonna stop the YouTube first, so.
Is that one as well?
Can I?
So put your.
Okay.